Lecture 16, continuing with the question, does justice require equality? Recall Rawls's two principles of justice. First principle, each person has the same indefeasible claim to a fully adequate scheme of equal basic liberties, which include political liberty like the right to vote, freedom of speech and assembly. And the second principle, which is in two parts, social and economic inequalities are to satisfy two conditions. First, that they are to be attached to offices and positions open to all under conditions of fair equality of opportunity. And that's analogous to runners not just starting at the same line, but having access to the same training and facilities. And the second bit of the second principle is these social and economic inequalities are to, if there are any such, are to be to the greatest benefit of the least advantaged members of society, which Rawls calls the difference principle. As I said last time, there are, of course, rival views, one being utilitarianism, that society should be organized to maximize happiness, and more generally, consequentialism, that society should be organized to maximize some value or another, which might be happiness. So utilitarianism is a special case of consequentialism, but it might be something else. For example, utility could be a matter of getting what you want. The more of your desires that are satisfied or fulfilled, the more utility you have. And, of course, depending on the empirical facts about happiness or utility, utilitarianism or consequentialism could lead to massive inequality or massive equality. I should emphasize that maximizing happiness or maximizing utility is not the same as maximizing wealth or maximizing income because of the declining marginal utility of money. Your first dollar is worth more to you than your millionth dollar. Frankfurt mentions this in his essay. We'll come on to that shortly. Let's have another look at the difference principle, the second part of the second principle. Social and economic inequalities are to be to the greatest benefit of the least advantaged members of society. As he says, the higher expectations of those better situated are just if and only if they work as part of a scheme which improves the expectations of the least advantaged members of society. The intuitive idea is that the social order is not to establish and secure the more attractive prospects of those better off unless doing so is to the advantage of the less fortunate. When Rawls talks about the difference principle in the reading, he also mentions something he calls the principle of efficiency, also known as Pareto efficiency or Pareto optimality. A distribution of resources is Pareto efficient just in case you can't redistribute the resources to make other people better off without simultaneously making some people worse off. And Rawls is not against Pareto efficiency. He just thinks, not unreasonably, that there's more to justice than being Pareto efficient. So, for example, a distribution in which one guy has all the money is Pareto efficient because it's impossible to redistribute the money to make people better off without simultaneously making the guy with all the money worse off. So this is what Rawls has in mind, the fact that the principle of efficiency is not enough for a theory of justice and needs to be supplemented when he says on page 1129, this principle, that is the second principle of his two principles of justice, removes the indeterminateness of the principle of efficiency. And one more look at our illustration of the difference principle. If we have two arrangements, suppose these are the only options for distributing resources, A and B, and those at the bottom of the ladder are worse off in A than they are in B, then no matter what's going on at the higher rungs, B is better than A from the point of view of the difference principle. I should say that we're, in this discussion, ignoring all sorts of complications. Among other things, we're just ignoring the difference between income and wealth. Now, Rawls is, of course, not a strict egalitarian. He's perfectly happy with inequalities, provided that they conform to the difference principle. But there is something egalitarian about Rawls's view, and he tries to explain what that is in section 17 of A Theory of Justice, which is in the reading. It's called The Tendency to Equality. So one egalitarian strand is that, on his view, quoting from Rawls, those who have been favoured by nature, whoever they are, may gain from their good fortune only on terms that improve the situation of those who have lost out. Now let's turn to a very different picture of how society should be organised with respect to wealth. Harry Frankfurt's.